Good evening and welcome to a windy night in the East End of London, Whitechapel, London, the scene of the Jack the Ripper murders in 1888 to 1889. My name's Neil Humphreys. I'm a former Scotland Yard detective and now I'm a ghost detective and work alongside Loraine Reese, a medium and clairvoyant. Tonight we're going to go around some of the Ripper sites, see what Loraine picks up, if it can be verified. Hope you come with us for the journey. We're going to start here, and the reason we're going to start here was this was the first of the known Jack the Ripper murder sites. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand over to Loraine and anybody else that's around to see what you're picking up. Okay, Loraine?
Okay, as I was walking here, I was feeling like we was being pulled back a little bit by spirit, that they didn't really want us to come here, because obviously, as you know, the murderer, whoever killed the girls has not been found. Okay. And I do feel that one of the girls, I certainly feel she looked like she was she had really bad teeth, and all I'm seeing is that she's smiling, but she's got half her teeth bloody missing, do you understand? And she's telling me that there was a second encounter with him, the second time he actually killed her. So I certainly feel she knew him before. She kept on giving me the initial R. I don't know whether that's her name or his name, but the initial R was given to me. She talks really strange. She's dressed with quite a lowish cut top on, and she's standing right by that man. It's almost like she's offering you her services, mate. Yeah, well, I think it's half a crown, if that. I'm going to say, because I don't think she charges much for those teeth, I can tell you.
Okay, can I also introduce to you Lawrence Summers? He knows the Ripper story quite well, and he'll be able to verify certain bits and pieces as we go along.
I'm Lawrence Summers. I'm a professional qualified blue badge tour guide, and I've been doing Jack the Ripper tours for about approximately 4 years now. Have I ever had any spooky things happen during the tours? To be frank, no. But I got a feeling there might be tonight.
But can I just point out, it's probably not just going to be all about Jack the Ripper, because obviously London's got a lot of history. And so there's going to be other stuff that we are going to pick up. So we've got a few dead people following us around, which is good. So that's all right for us. You might get a really strange feelings. You might get really hot, really cold. In the West Beach one, people having their hair pulled. So you might just have lots of experiences.
I'm Dr. Mary Ross. I write Lorraine's books, and I also, turns out I'm a psychic sketch artist. I didn't even know I could do this until I met Loraine. Anyway, when she was looking at that, talking about that person, Mary, I asked her, I said, is she wearing a purple dress? She said, yes. And so then I did this picture, and she said, yeah, that's exactly her. And there she is, Mary, the first victim that we have met tonight on the Ghost Walk.
It's almost like I can hear horses and a bit of a, like something being pulled by these horses. So I do think it was something where the bodies were put on to take them to somewhere after they've been dead. And I certainly do feel that somebody was just found round about here. She shows me that her eyes are out of her sockets. I don't know, I just feel there was lots of blood, and it just wasn't an easy death. It's almost like he peeled her skin. I'm not quite sure what she's showing me, but she's telling me her skin's been pulled off. It wasn't even a good knife, it wasn't, because she shows me it was all jagged, and it's almost like he took off her boobs. It was absolutely awful. And she tells me that there was two of them. There was two of them that he'd done the same kind of thing too. And oh God, can I really say this?
Yeah.
Okay, it's almost like she's showing me that he's putting his hands up her insides and pulling out her womb, and she was pregnant with child at the time.
Okay. Was this one linked or not?
Yes, this one was. Because she tells me that in this really funny, sounding voice, she's almost like she's a bit tipsy, a bit drunk. We was all connected. We all done the same thing.
Right. Can she describe her killer at all?
She tells me that he come down here many times and that he did have an horse. She shows me he's coming and he's being dropped off, and it's almost like he got dropped off by other people down the bottom, and he would go and look for women. That he was definitely somebody that was into medicine. She tells me he's interested in the body. He just didn't want sex. He wanted the body.
Okay. Has she given you any names?
She's telling me about Kitty. Now, I'm not sure whether her name's Kitty, but the name Kitty. And she's also telling me that she had 3 names. She had 2 that she worked under and 1 she was born with. Was she a prostitute? Yeah, because she shows me that she done it with 9 men that day. Lucky her. She's also now showing me there's something to do here. This gentleman's got a very tall hat on that's coming across, and I feel that he wanted her services, and then I do feel then he killed her, because she tells me that she didn't expect to die. She was only going to get some money.
Okay. When you're describing a tall hat, is it more something like what I'm wearing?
No,
or
a bit taller.
Like
taller.
a top hat?
Yeah, top hat.
Okay.
And I do feel very smart, very, very smart. And he had really long hands, got really long hands.
Okay, is there anything else?
I want to go to an hospital.
Okay.
Something to do with an hospital. Because she shows me an hospital, but I'm seeing there's about 20 beds all like in rows. It's not like how we would know hospitals today. It's all like in rows. And she tells me that there was an hospital.
Was that where she was staying, or something connected with her killer?
Something connected with her killer. I was hearing the name of Richard.
Well, Lawrence, would you like to say what you know about this particular site?
Well, what actually happened here was there was a victim who is, I suppose what you might say, a debatable victim, called Martha Tabram, who was killed in the early days of August 1888, before the murders officially stroke unofficially happened. The first official Jack the Ripper murder is believed to be that of Polly Nichols, or Marianne Nichols, which was the first stop we were at tonight at Durwood Street by the old, what was the old school. But this particular murder happened about 3 weeks before that. Now, some people say this was a kind of run-up, if you like, or a practice, or an overture to the Ripper murders themselves. However, a lot of Ripper experts, Ripperologists, say that this can't have been a Ripper murder because the woman was stabbed. There was a lot of blood. The woman was stabbed 39 times. Martha Tabram was stabbed 39 times. She, although the breasts weren't cut off, but there were stab wounds in the breast. So it's always been debatable whether this was in fact a Ripper murder. I don't know how many of you know about the Ripper murders, but he tended to mutilate the women. And what they're saying, you know, what a Ripper expert might say is that this woman wasn't mutilated. This was like a vicious, almost vengeful attack. Now, in terms of the top hat, the last time Martha Tabram was seen, she was with a soldier. Her and her friend Pearly Pole, obviously a nickname, were out for the night having a drink, getting fairly plastered, and they were what was known really as soldiers' prostitutes. They went almost exclusively with soldiers. So there could be a link in that a lot of soldiers would have been able to ride a horse, and soldiers would have worn also some kind of a hat. She wasn't mutilated. It would be, this murder would, a lot of people would see it as maybe a vengeful attack. It would seem likely that the killer may not have been the soldier himself, but somebody else. Because if a soldier wanted to kill her, he might just kill her very quickly. This sounds like somebody who was maybe a jealous lover, but again, it's all speculation. So this is sometimes considered the first Ripper murder, but a lot of Ripperologists would say it can't have been the Ripper because of the way that the Ripper did kill his victims, which was kind of more or less the way you were describing.
With regards to the Scotland Yard investigation that took place here, first of all, when this murder was actually investigated by H District CID, and it wasn't until the second one that they actually called the Yard in. The initial one was done by Detective Inspector Edmund Reed. Though in the Metropolitan Police docket of this, there was it was considered as a possibility, but over time they kept it outside. But it was the closest one to what they called the 5 known Ripper victims.
Was it raining when she died?
It was really raining when she died, although it was quite a warm summer's day, but it was quite yeah, that's that. And she tells me that there was definitely her boobs. It was her breast, because she was very much into her breast, the way she was dressed, and I just feel that they were being like ripped.
Okay, shall we walk on?
Sure.
I see it as it happens, it's like a black and white movie playing. She was definitely mutilated, because I can see her breast being stabbed off. It was absolutely awful. She really, really did know her killer. So I definitely feel that it was something to do near a night by the hospital. It was something to do with an hospital. She was absolutely adamant. Well, that's what he told her anyway.
Do you hear it?
I do. I do, yes.
Lawrence, why have we stopped here?
We just thought, purely and simply, this wasn't a murder site, but many of the because we're on church land, it's sanctified land, many of the prostitutes hung out here because they were safe. They were safe from prosecution, safe from arrest.
Yeah.
So as long as they hung out here, and of course they couldn't hang out here all night because otherwise they'd never make any money, they were safe. And the men would line up along the streets on the other side and look over, decide who they fancied, and then come over and pick one of them to go off with them. Now, there was also a strange loophole in the law, which was about the prostitutes keeping on the move. And if they kept on the move, then they were free from prosecution. But if they seemed to be obviously waiting for someone to approach them and offer them money, then the police could possibly, under certain circumstances, interfere. But most of the time, the police left them alone as long as they were on this land. And it's believed that the 4th victim, or the 4th official Ripper victim, because of course we know that what we know is that we don't know how many were killed really, was probably picked up outside of the church here and then taken around the corner.
Okay.
So it wasn't where they were safe here then, yeah?
Yeah.
They were safe. They were safe here.
It was being kept safe, yeah.
That's probably what you meant by hiding, like.
Yeah. I mean, it comes from the legislation goes back to 1824 about prostitution, and it was brought in after the Napoleonic Wars.
As I'm standing there, I just get the feeling that I'm being dragged backwards and that I've got something going over my mouth. I don't know whether he put something over their faces, so I feel like I can't breathe there with her. And she tells me that every piece of her hair from her lower region was ripped out. But she tells me that she was definitely his favourite victim. For some reason, he kept parts of her somewhere. There was a couple of parts that the police never did find off of her body. And I do feel that it was almost like he put them into, it looks like envelope, but not an envelope. It's really a weird thing that they're giving me. It's like a funny material. And I do feel again, I'm picking up quite a tall man. And all I'm feeling is that he put his hands over her face and killed her before he started ripping her to pieces.
Can you say, is she describing the person to you, or you're seeing him through her?
He's speaking to me. Posh, really kind of like posh old English. And it's almost like he's speaking in a way that I feel that he was a very educated man. And I'm seeing a badge. I want to say it's like a crest of some sort. I don't quite know what a crest is, but it's like a crest of some sort. And he's got this badge, and this badge is on like a black carriage, but it's got like a crest on it, or some kind of like gold. It's very posh, this badge, and it's almost like he's got this really giggly laugh, and it's almost like He tells me people feel they know me, they do know me, but nobody can prove me. And this is what he's saying to me. It's almost like he shows me that his prints were covered. I'm seeing also some kind of, I'd only describe it like he was like taking bits of the body out, but I'm seeing like some kind of, it's mainly featured on the sexual regions. It's quite disgusting, but I think he would have kept part of this.
This was basically the fourth, again, accepted Ripper murder, and by far the worst up to this point. This is Mitre Square, and it's where the body of Catherine Eddowes, victim number 4, a woman in her mid-40s, was found. Out of all the prostitutes, she was the one who, when people questioned friends and family, seemed to come across as probably the nicest and the most friendly, like the most kind of laid back and jovial of all of the prostitutes. She was killed in a very vicious way. Her throat was slit, as were all of the victims, all of the recognised victims. The body was cut up the middle. The intestines were removed. One of the kidneys was not just removed but taken away, and the womb was also cut out and taken. So what he wanted to do with these parts, we don't know. There wasn't any evidence of him having any sexual intercourse with any of the victims, nor were the victims robbed. Some of them still had money on them, which means that his motives were, perhaps even deeper and darker than that. They were something to do with, I guess, body parts. There were a lot of body snatchers at the time stealing organs to sell, but my hunch is that that wasn't what this guy was about. The thing is, this murder happened in a very short space of time. There was a policeman who would patrol the area because it was a very dangerous area. Much darker than it would have been today with all of this electric lighting in the background. There would have been gas lamps, and every 15 minutes a policeman would patrol the area. And on this particular night, a policeman came by at 1:30 and found nobody here. 15 minutes later, he came back and found the body here. Now, that means that all of this stuff that was done to Catherine Eddowes was done in less than 15 minutes, which would have been very, very difficult to do unless you knew what you were doing and what you were looking for. But there were a couple of witnesses who said that they were standing just as you remember the bit where we just came in, and there was a couple of guys coming home from the pub who said that it was just after 1:30 in the morning that they could see a man and a woman standing here talking to each other. Obviously, this must have been Catherine Eddowes and the killer. So this means that, in fact, this murder may have taken 12 minutes or 11 minutes or less. One would hazard a guess that the killer knew what he was looking for and must have had possibly had some kind of knowledge of surgery to be able to do it in such a short space of time. I'm often asked, why didn't the women scream out for help? Well, this man who probably came across as a very gentle, charming man, possibly well-spoken, also possibly well-educated, probably gained their confidence first, and would then grab them, cut the throat so that stops them making any noise, and that's done very quickly, of course, and then carry on and do the rest of what he does to them. Remembering that after the throat is cut, there is still oxygen going to the brain, so a person is still alive for about 20 seconds. Whether or not he waited for those 20 seconds and then did what he did, or did it while the person was still in some way conscious.
Lorraine, you're looking quite distressed.
Yeah, because that's exactly what I saw. That's exactly what I saw. I could see he was moving parts of her body, and it did make me feel really physically sick. But I do feel that she was certainly still quite conscious before. It's almost like she still knew what was just about to go on. But she tells me that, that her family still really, really missed her, and that she had, quite a respectful send-off.
Well, this isn't a Ripper murder site. This is the site of Catherine Eddowes, the fourth victim I told you about in Mitre Square, had some of her skirt ripped off. And a policeman was walking by and spotted this piece of skirt through a little alleyway. If you're looking down the road now, it appears that there are no alleyways. But what you'll notice is that some of these doorways are narrow, and some of the shutters are very narrow. And at the time of the murders, those doorways, those shutters weren't there. They were alleyways. They've been filled in since. So they found the piece of skirt down there, but what they also found was something that has gone down in history as being far more interesting to the case, which was a chalk message written on the wall, which said, "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." Now, it's a very strange sentence. There's no evidence at all that the killer wrote it. Nobody knows who wrote it. Anybody could have written it. But the fact that it appeared right next to where this skirt was found was strange in itself. The word Jews, incidentally, was spelt Juwes, which would indicate that whoever had written it, possibly, unless they were trying to trick the police, didn't know how to spell the word Jew.
The media were getting into a frenzy about this because this was the fourth victim that they were linked, and they'd already by that time given the name Jack the Ripper to the killer. The writing on the wall, the Metropolitan Police feared that it could cause an anti-Semitic unrest in the area, and so that's why that they scrubbed it off, because they didn't want to stir up the Jews and to start attacking Jewish people.
But do you feel there was more bodies than, more victims than what was actually found?
Well, the Metropolitan Police actually looked at either side of the 5 murders. There was 2 that they looked at before the murders and 2 after the 5, 4 after the 5. And they did look at that, but they decided at that time, bearing in mind that you didn't have DNA, you possibly didn't have any fingerprinting at that particular time, so it was very difficult to them to sort of necessarily forensically link the murders.
Because I'm definitely picking up a lady from over there that was dragged over here and killed. I don't feel he done the same things to her, so maybe this was a different murder altogether.
Okay.
But I certainly feel that her body was never found, but she was killed there, and I do feel that she was taken either from here and over there, because I do feel that she tells me that she was definitely a prostitute.
A lot of these little alleyways as well led on to what would have been the houses that the DOS houses, where they'd pay about 4 pence a night. They would be off these sort of alleyways, and very often there'd be 100 in one particular building. The Metropolitan Police at the time reckoned in the area there were 1,200 prostitutes and over 65 brothels in the area.
Wow.
I think the thing to remember about the murders is that the reason that the figure 5 is normally given is because of the way the women were mutilated. And that seemed to be the particular trademark of Jack the Ripper, or the man who became known as Jack the Ripper, if indeed he was a man, because, again, it's all speculation. But that doesn't mean to say that there weren't possibly other murders, and it doesn't mean to say that the same man didn't kill other women, perhaps in different ways. But what made the particular murders unique was the way in which the women were mutilated, which is where the name Ripper came from.
What year were you seeing this one, Lorraine?
I was seeing about the same year, because the way she was dressed, so it's probably around about the same time.
Yeah.
And I certainly feel that she was definitely, because she knew the victim that was dead before her, and I do feel they would have shared a lot of the same like places, because she shows me that they was used to walk and laugh, and that's why I could hear lots of laughing.
Okay.
Mhm.
Right, shall we move on?
As I'm linking in now, I'm seeing a lady with like gingery colour hair, and I do feel that she's showing me that, I don't know whether it's ginger or brown, but it's going a bit gingery, and I certainly feel as she comes forward, she tells me that she wasn't his last victim, but this is the last one that's recorded before he died. Do you understand this? And she tells me that she died very, very graphic as well, and I'm seeing basically stuff being ripped from her body as well. She's giving me here, I want to go maybe towards more of a colder time than one of the victims. What month does she actually go?
November.
I knew it was really colder compared to what, because I do feel that she had a shawl round her, and I do feel the shawl was very much something that was fanned. But she's very upset because this was the last gift from her mother before her mother died of a bad cough, bless her. But she tells me that she really, really didn't feel a thing and that he'd killed her very quickly. Now, I know that it was being said that he never had sex with her, but I do feel that he did have some sexual kicks with what he was doing, because it was almost like he was really kind of getting very like, I can hear like an heavy panting with him. So it's either that or he's in a rush to do what he was doing. But I do feel that he shows me himself, and I've got to describe him to you. He's about this eye, so I don't quite work out at all that is. And I do feel that he's very much dressed in black, and it's like a big black kind of, I want to say like a coat of some sort. But I do feel that he had really nice shoes. He's very much showing me that he's shoes. I certainly felt back earlier that I could see like the crest, and to me it looked like the royal crest. So I wasn't going to really say that, but I've just been told that I can say that because I need to give you more evidence. And it's almost like they did pull him in to question him, but let him go. And I don't quite know whether it come out in the public.
Okay, the Metropolitan Police had 4 main suspects, although over the years and all the investigations that have been done, there are over 20 that the Metropolitan Police have recognised, and there are hundreds that have come out when people are doing their separate investigations. The Metropolitan Police didn't necessarily have any connections to royalty, and that come up later, a lot later than their investigations into the early 1890s. I think it was about 1892. They scaled down. Of course, they never closed a murder, but they scaled it down and stopped looking for the suspects. Of the 20 suspects that the Metropolitan Police actually looked into, the Duke of Clarence used to come down to Whitechapel to visit some of the areas. One of the royal surgeons was also linked down here as well, and a barrister by the name of Druitt, although I think since that Druitt was ruled out of one of the murders, because at the time of one of the murders he was seen in Blackheath. But yes, there have been connections to royalty in the past, but nothing concrete. It wasn't one that the head of the CID, a chap by the name of Anderson, and Charles McNaughton, one of the assistant commissioners who come onto the case in 1889, it wasn't one of the suspects that they actually considered at the time.
Can I just interrupt? I was saying to one of the crowd earlier, I can't remember who I was saying it to, but I was saying that I believe it was something to do with like the royal surgeon, and that he wanted to get some kind of recognition for his work, because he really wanted status to be this best surgeon and get all this money, because he's telling me now that he used to practice on calves and that he used to cut up horses, and I certainly feel he had no inner ambitions to do anything. It was almost like anything living he wanted to slice up and take parts, and he tells me these women wasn't necessary, they wasn't needed.
Lawrence, do you want to say about the site here?
Yeah, well, this is not a very old building, actually. It's a 20th century building. What was here before was Victorian tenement blocks. And in one of those lived the 27-year-old Mary Kelly, who had reddish blonde hair and was thought to be certainly the most attractive of all the victims. She owed her landlord a lot of rent, and she had gone out to the local pub, the 10 Bells, which is still there today. She wanted to try and borrow money, but she couldn't borrow as much as she needed to pay the rent. So what she did was what she had to do, which was walk down a commercial street rather, and get picked up. And that's exactly what she did. And it's funny, actually, because when you mentioned George at the first sight, I thought it didn't mean anything to me. And now, at the last sight, you'll mention him again, there was a guy called George Hutchinson who knew her, and he said that he had seen her being stopped on Commercial Street by a man who was very well dressed with a long dark coat, a cap, and carrying a brown paper package under his arm. And this was a description that had been used before when people had seen men who may have been the killer. So what had happened was they disappeared into Mary Kelly's flat, and the next morning the landlord had sent his messenger boy around to collect the rent, and the messenger had banged on the door several times and not managed to get an answer. So he'd looked through a little piece of window had been broken and covered with some material, and he looked through that, and in the room he saw what looked like it might be a body on the bed, and he went to get the police, and the police came and broke the door down, and what they saw was Mary Kelly's body, and it makes Catherine Eddowes seem tame. He'd cut her up the middle, he'd ripped out the intestines, he'd ripped out both the kidneys, he'd ripped out the liver, he'd taken the heart, he'd cut off the breasts, mutilated the face, but what he also did, which is what you might be picking up about the legs, is he took the knife and sliced off the skin in several places, one of which was the face, another which was the arms, and another which was the thighs of the legs. So this poor woman was just really like a skeleton with flesh and blood on it. I mean, she was almost unrecognisable as a human being. And this was the last of the recognised Ripper murders. After that, they seemed to stop. Although a month later, they find on the banks of the River Thames the body of a guy called John Montague Druitt, who had trained as a barrister, had not been successful, had become a teacher, and whose father, it turns out, was a surgeon. Now, you know, it could just be coincidence, but he was also a manic depressive who'd left a suicide note saying that he couldn't stand his depression, that, you know, he didn't want to end up like his mother, and he had just done himself in. And his body was found a month after the official murders stopped. So whether or not he was the Ripper, of course we don't know. But time-wise, it does seem to tie in.
We've got, somebody's been taking pictures here, and we've got orbs all around you, Lorraine. Because it's really freaky. I mean, they're just like, and it wasn't in any of the other spots, but right here, they're just surrounded by them.
Obviously, I really don't believe that he was the killer, because he tells me I wasn't the killer. I was mad, I was insane, but I was not the killer. And I do feel that the killer, he actually did die quite soon after his last victim, although I do believe that he did die of natural causes, because I do feel that his body was almost like it went kind of gangrene inside.
Right, well, what happened was, incidentally, I'm not suggesting that that's a theory of mine, but it's just that John Montague Druitt, in terms of time, does seem to link him, because his body was found after.
Some ripperologists have said that he was at Blackheath at the time of one of the murders.
Yeah, there's also...
That's why the police sort of eliminated it.
Yeah.
But there's thousands.
There isn't actually a suspect that stands up to scrutiny, actually. No. Not a single one. What happened was there was a letter that was a letter of confession that was written to a newspaper, the Daily Star. This guy had confessed to the murders and signed his name Jack the Ripper. Now, most people don't believe that letter was written by the killer at all. You know, that it was a hoax.
In fact, the police believed it was a hoax. They actually believed that it was possibly a journalist trying to drum up support for their paper. They didn't have Twitter or Facebook at that time, so they was getting it what they could buy off the newsstands. Incidentally, just over, we passed that church in Commercial Street there when I was a police officer here in the 1990s. Just outside that church, prostitutes were still using that as a place that they used to pick up their clients. So even in the 20th century as it was then, they were still picking up their clients in that place.
I've always seen dead people. You say ghosts, I say the people, spirits that are on the other side. But it's really interesting doing these kind of walks, because, you know, most of the energies that we're picking up are very traumatic deaths, and that have never really come to terms with the way that they've passed. So they've stayed quite earthbound. And obviously the Ripper, as people know him, I do feel that he was a very tormented soul. So to go up on the light and be accountable for what he's done, he's not really interested in doing that. So I do feel just like, you know, all bad people, you know, when they're on the earth, they like to stay quite earthly because that's where they feel much safer. So it's quite interesting that he was following us around quite a lot. I'm quite happy with what he done, you know, so it was quite an interesting kind of, different to the normal ghost walk. Yeah, but I really did enjoy it, yeah.
He's still here.
He's still here.
He was not allowed to pass on to a happy place.
He's not allowed to pass on because he doesn't accept what he done was bad. He actually believes what he done was for the sake of human race. Which, you know, I suppose back then, you know, I do truly believe by what he's telling me, there was definitely a surgical link around him. And I do feel that he just wanted to get very frustrated. He just wanted to remove body parts and experiment with them.
Does he want to give you his name to get some recognition?
I kept on hearing the name of Robert. I was hearing Robert all the way through. And I do feel that's what his name was. But he was known as Bruce. So I do feel that his name was Robert, but sometimes he was known as Bruce, which I thought Bob was always Robert, but never mind. But I certainly feel that he did have a connection with the palace, and I certainly don't see the palace as we know the palace to be now, because it looks very different to Buckingham Palace. But I certainly feel he was very much there, and he tells me that he was definitely in the top 2 of his class, you know, because he's showing me his studies, but he wanted to be number 1. And that's why he was doing what he was doing, so he could get the recognition of being the king's surgeon.
Might he have used a fake name with some of the women?
Oh yeah, he never used his real name at all. And he tells me that he used to tell him his name was Charles. But he's very bright, very smart in his appearance. And I certainly feel he really did enjoy doing what he done.
Was he married, or did he not like women?
No, didn't like women. Never liked women. He looks to me like he's about 30, 34. He doesn't look very old. It's very hard to age him there because I feel they looked older than their usual days. But you know, I certainly feel he looked about 30, 34. He's also showing me that he wore 3 different hats when he took his victims. And I certainly do feel these hats, everything's black, everything was black. And do you remember when I said I could see him putting the body parts into something which looked like an envelope? And the guide said he took a plastic, like a paper bag with him. And that's where he put all the body parts to take with him. But he tells me he had 2 knives. 2 knives.
The police actually received some body parts in the post via I think one of the news agencies. Yeah. But again, they wasn't sure whether it was connected or not.
I certainly feel that he really, you know, he was very happy with his parts and he won't part with them. So I'm not really sure there was his parts, because he's saying to me he loved his parts. It would almost like he'd be looking at them all the time. But he tells me through what the last body, what he killed, he contacted some kind of disease what actually killed him.
Okay, that concluded our actual first videoed ghost walk with Lorraine here in the East End of London. Lorraine was picking up quite a lot of things, particularly around the victims. She was seen to be linking in very well with the victims, and she was getting quite strong on her thoughts about the royal connection. In the past there have been quite a few that have connected the royal connections. There was one of Queen Victoria's surgeons, was also quite close to the Duke of Clarence. The Duke of Clarence has also alleged that he may have fathered a child as well, so you know there may have been another reason why there may have been some sort of cover-up with regards to that. And I think that the surgeon involved maybe had homosexual tendencies towards the Duke as well, so it might have been that may have been a double motive for the killings. I've known Lorraine now for nearly 2 years, This is the 4th ghost walk that we've done. I've particularly been interested as a former detective into murders that have taken place and not necessarily solved, because I do feel that when I've been with Lorraine, and this is the 4th occasion I've been out with Lorraine on a ghost walk, that Lorraine does link into the victims, and that she does get a sense of how they suffered particularly, and could give police good leads in the future. I believe wholeheartedly in what Lorraine is saying. I don't know why she comes out with the things she does. As a detective, I always look for facts and I look for evidence. And certainly tonight, Lorraine was linking in with certain facts. Sometimes we'd get distracted with other things, but you've got to bear in mind that the area we're in has been here since Roman times. In fact, when we was near Mitre Square, there's a site of a Roman burial site not far by in the Minories. In fact, the oldest person to be found on British soil was actually found at Blackwall, just down the road, 4,000 years BC. So you can probably see all the levels of history that are surrounding this sort of area. So yes, at times Lorraine will get linked in, but she was getting linked in tonight. She was getting linked into something that had happened. She was getting messages for people that were on the walk. She was also getting linked into the craze, and I'm sure that's another ghost walk that we could perhaps do in the future. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'll say good night.